America went insane over the weekend. That's barely an overstatement. People in their 80s who have lived in the U.S. all their lives said they'd never seen anything like it. Ask an 80-year-old. This was without precedent in the modern era. A small group of highly aggressive, emotionally charged activists took over our culture. They forced the entire country to obey their will. It all happened so fast and with such ferocity that virtually no one resisted it. People seemed bewildered, even stunned by what was happening. Statements of fact and opinion that were entirely within the bounds of reasonable conversation just last Sunday, suddenly, a week later, were enough to get you fired from your job, and a number of people were fired. An awful lot happened this weekend. For the next hour, we want to assess the aftermath of it all, suggest what it may mean, and where this country is likely to go from here. But first, we want to give you a sense of what happened. We're going to begin tonight in Minneapolis. That's where the Black Lives Matter riots first began almost 2 weeks ago. As the violence there raged, some Democratic leaders in Minneapolis came to a conclusion that didn't, on the surface anyway, make intuitive sense. What their city really needs, they decided, is less law enforcement. In fact, no law enforcement. So they began to demand that Minneapolis, quote, defund the police. Now, the first thing you notice about this idea is how unpopular with the public it is. Almost nobody in the country supports it. But the activists, undeterred, kept pushing the idea, and within days, pressure mounted on the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, to get rid of his city's police department. This was a problem for Frey. Frey has greater political aspirations, and this was the last conversation he wanted to have. So Frey did his best to change the subject with a mix of manic enthusiasm and feigned empathy. Frey is well practiced in those areas. Here he is a couple of years ago with his preferred brand of community outreach. It didn't work, then or now. Activists wanted actual answers, so Mayor Frey tried step 2 in the process, groveling.
I've been coming to grips with my own brokenness in this situation, my own failures, my own shortcomings, and I know there needs to be deep-seated structural reform.
Again, good try, brokenness. It sounds like a sermon. Give a raise to the staffer who scripted that. But again, no dice. Black Lives Matter, to their credit, wanted a real answer to their question. It was then that Jacob Frey made a fatal mistake. He put himself in a position where he could be asked that question directly. Here's what happened next.
Yes or no, will you commit to defunding Minneapolis Police Department?
Abolition of it?
What did I say?
Yeah,
we don't want no more police.
No
Is
more.
that clear?
I do not support full abolition of the police.
All right! Lie! You're wasting our time! Get the out of here! Go home, Jacob, go home! Go home, Jacob, go home! Go home, Jacob, go home!
What a remarkable piece of tape that is. Has a big city mayor in this country ever been more thoroughly humiliated? Get the F out of here, she screams. Go! Well, the correct answer to that, needless to say, is up yours, lady. I'm not going anywhere. I run this city. Do you doubt that the entire crowd would have cheered Jacob Frey if he'd said that? People always admire resolve, even when they disagree with the point of view. But that's not what Jacob Frey did. Frey slunk away like a child caught doing something filthy. The most telling moment, though, came just before that, when the woman in sunglasses threatened to defeat the mayor in the next election. What does that tell you? It tells you that Black Lives Matter is, in fact, a political party, maybe the strongest political party in the United States as of tonight. Its members believe they can reshape this country, and so far, they're proving to be right. You can always tell which political movements are ascendant, which are headed up, by how straightforward their members and sympathizers are about what they believe. Strong people say what they think out loud. They have no reason not to. They're not embarrassed of their beliefs. They think they're winning. With that in mind, watch this clip from CNN this morning. This is the president of the Minneapolis City Council, Lisa Bender. Bender explains that the desire for safety, the desire not to, for example, have your home invaded by violent criminals, is in fact a sign of racism.
Do you understand that the word dismantle or police free also makes some people nervous? For instance, what if in the middle of the night my home is broken into? Who do I call?
Yes, I mean, I hear that loud and clear from a lot of my neighbors. And I know, and myself too, and I know that that comes from a place of privilege, because for those of us for whom the system is working, I think we need to step back and imagine what it would feel like to already live in that reality, where calling the police may mean more harm is done.
Hello, police. Armed men are breaking into my home. Help! Shut up, racist! Click! That's the world Lisa Bender is calling for. How many people watching CNN this morning as they got dressed agreed with Lisa Bender? Sure, that sounds reasonable. Calling the police during a break-in definitely qualifies as racism. It's hard to believe, even among CNN's audience, that very many people thought that. It's so obviously nuts. On the other hand, it doesn't really matter at this point what the public thinks about anything. In the case of this idea, many Democratic leaders are already sold on it. Here's former Congressman Keith Ellison on MSNBC over the weekend. Keep in mind as you watch him speak that Ellison is now the chief law enforcement officer in Minnesota. He's the attorney general. Ellison argues here that it's wrong for police to bring guns to domestic violence calls. Seriously.
We send out people with guns, and they are there to use deadly force no matter what the problem may be. If the problem is sexual assault, we send somebody with a gun. If the problem is domestic violence, we send somebody with a gun. If the problem is somebody in a mental health crisis, we send somebody with a gun.
Okay, we know what you're thinking. That's Keith Ellison, kind of an unfair example. Ellison has long been a crazy person. He was once attached to the Nation of Islam. Back then, he called himself Keith Hakeem. More recently, Ellison endorsed Antifa. Yes, that's all true. But unlike other race-baiting extremists, Keith Ellison may have a promising political future. It's very easy to imagine it. If Joe Biden wins, Keith Ellison could be the Attorney General of the United States. At the very least, he would be first in line to become U.S. Attorney for the state of Minnesota, the top federal prosecutor there. What would happen then? We may live to find out. Again, all of this probably strikes you as wild-eyed craziness, flat earth stuff. Eliminate the police? Really? But things change fast. Look at how quickly they changed just over the weekend. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is a skilled trend spotter, if there ever was one, is already acting as if defund the police, again, a proposal that no sane person even mentioned in public just last month, is now the defining civil rights issue of our time. You'd have to be a bigoted dinosaur, a bad person to oppose it.
This is one of those moments. This right now is one of those moments. So if you're an elected official that for any reason is on this call, I'm asking you to ask yourself, what are you willing to sacrifice to make sure that overfunded police departments are defunded?
So think about what you just saw. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez isn't just a member of Congress. She's maybe the most famous member of Congress. She's also a surrogate for Joe Biden. So a lot is on the line here. Ocasio-Cortez didn't say that accidentally. She had a reason for saying it. Why did she say that? What is going on here? Well, as usual, the truth bears no resemblance whatsoever to what they're telling you. Think about it for just a second. Democratic politicians control the police departments of virtually every big city in this country. Now they're telling you they want to get rid of those police departments. If they did, that would mean less power for themselves. So right away, you know there's lying going on. Democrats do not relinquish power voluntarily, ever, period. Republicans frequently do. Democrats never do. So that's the first thing to know. Something obviously is going on here beneath the surface. This has to be an attempt to increase the power of the Democratic Party because every policy they push is, always. And in fact, that's exactly what's happening here. Democrats have no intention of abolishing the police. Listen carefully and you will hear them admit that. Instead, they want to replace the police. Take the people who currently have badges, many of whom, by the way, voted for Donald Trump, and swap them out for new people, people who hate Donald Trump and hate the people who voted for Donald Trump. That's what's actually happening here. And it makes sense. Law enforcement is one of the very few institutions remaining in this country that the left does not yet control. Democrats hate the police because they don't control the police. Very simple. You remember 35 years ago when Democrats were constantly attacking the U.S. military? We don't hear that anymore. Why is that? It's very simple. The left took over the Pentagon. No reason to attack people you control, which they do. And they plan to do the same thing to your local police department. Let's be clear. What Democrats are proposing isn't some form of radical libertarianism where the cops leave and citizens police their own neighborhoods. No, it's the opposite of that. What they're proposing is a power grab. Defund the police is a move toward authoritarian social control cloaked in the language of identity politics. Already in the middle of a total breakdown of law and order, as we watch our cities burn, you are seeing new moves to prevent you from defending yourself and your family in the middle of it. Just last Tuesday, Marjorie Greene, who was running for Congress in Georgia, posted this ad on Facebook, and within 2 days, Facebook pulled it down.
I have a message for Antifa terrorists. Stay the hell out of Northwest Georgia. You won't burn our churches, loot our businesses, or destroy our homes.
So Facebook has a policy against violence, not the violence engulfing our cities, but the violence of you defending your family. They create the chaos. You're not allowed to defend yourself. You are, in other words, and this is, of course, the point, wholly dependent upon them. In the future, the left envisions the only people who will have guns are people on their team. And that's exactly what defund the police really means. It means a woke militia policing our cities, enforcing Democratic Party orthodoxy. Imagine if the Diversity and Inclusion Department at Brown University had the power to arrest you. Imagine if the Black Lives Matter rioters had weapons and immunity from prosecution. That's what they're talking about. Partisan law enforcement. And partisan law enforcement, incidentally, is hardly without precedent. In fact, it's the rule in the third world. This is an attempt to bring it here. What's again striking is how few American voters support this. Very few. Polling from just a week ago showed that only 16% of Americans favored cutting funding to police departments. There was almost no party divide on that question, surprisingly. The numbers were virtually the same for Republicans and Democrats. The divide was economic. If you make more than $100,000 a year, you are more than twice as likely to think cutting the police was a good idea. And there's no mystery there, of course. Rich people live in safe places. They can afford their own security. Jeff Bezos doesn't need the police. He's got his own. Unfortunately for the rest of us, and it is unfortunate, Jeff Bezos and people like him are the only ones allowed to talk right now. It's hard to overstate how vicious the crackdown on free speech and free thought has been in the last few days. Here's the new rule, and it defines everything. You are not allowed to question Black Lives Matter in any way. Full stop. That rule has been enforced without mercy everywhere, and not just in this country. In Vancouver, a men's basketball coach was fired for liking a tweet that questioned Black Lives Matter. Meanwhile, a player on the LA Galaxy, that's the professional soccer team in Los Angeles, was fired because his wife said something critical online. Not him, he didn't do it. His wife. Doesn't matter. They canned the player anyway. Imagine being a high school student right now. High school students who refused to show affirmative support for Black Lives Matter on their Instagram accounts were shunned by their friends. Journalists who asked too many questions about the group were fired or silenced. Again, not an exaggeration. Now, you'd think people in the media would resent this. Presumably some do. But almost everybody stayed quiet about it. They were too afraid. And some applauded. The New York Times ran an op-ed demanding that people disown their own families if their families fail to support Black Lives Matter enthusiastically enough. Tell your relatives, tell your friends, the author wrote, that, quote, you will not be visiting or answering phone calls until they take significant action in supporting Black lives through protest or financial contributions, end quote. Got that? Sorry, Mom. I know you're old and alone and miss your grandchildren, but we are shunning you until you send more money to Black Lives Matter. In an environment like this, we've never lived in an environment like this, but you can imagine, in an environment like this, most people get the message very fast. And the weak ones are quick to join in, just like the good little red guards they've always been underneath it all. Here's Mitt Romney on the march.
A way to end violence and brutality and to make sure that people understand that Black Lives Matter.
Mitt just wants to make sure that Americans understand, get it through their thick heads, that Black Lives Matter. As if Americans didn't know that. But accusing your entire country of racism turns out to be a pretty small price for someone like Mitt Romney. What Romney's really worried about, what all the finance moguls funding this movement are worried about, is that someone somewhere will ask the obvious questions. How much have you, Mitt Romney, personally made? How rich have you become by sending jobs overseas, working class jobs, by charging obscene interest rates, and by otherwise harming poor and black communities economically? All the basic crimes are economic. Mitt Romney doesn't want to talk about that at all, so he marches. And Black Lives Matter couldn't be happier about it. The complicity of people like Mitt Romney gives groups like Black Lives Matter strength. Black Lives Matter is becoming more powerful by the hour, and they know it. Watch this interview from Saturday in which a Black Lives Matter activist cheerfully admits he may soon incinerate people with gasoline.
I'm a leader of this FTP movement. It means a lot of things. It can mean free the people. It can mean for the people. It could also mean fire to property. We're hoping de Blasio and Cuomo come out and talk to us and give the youth some direction. But if they don't, the next stop is the Diamond District. And gasoline, thanks to Trump, is awfully cheap.
The amazing thing is not just that he said that, though that's shocking enough. The amazing thing is that he said it on television live. He wasn't worried about being arrested. He's not like you at all. You're still not allowed to attend church services or go to big weddings. Too bad you're not friends with D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser. You could do anything. Bowser just renamed a park near the White House Black Lives Matter Plaza, and nobody criticized her for it. MSNBC practically sent her flowers.
Having a mural, Black Lives Matter, in huge block letters across 3 blocks leading up to the White House. As I said to you on a Sunday, badass move that you made.
The Black Lives Matter mural is a representation of an expression of our saying no, but also identifying and claiming a part of our city that had been taken over by federal forces.
Mayor Bowser was buoyed and gratified by the support she received from her friends over on MSNBC. So she also had Black Lives Matter painted in enormous yellow letters on 16th Street in downtown D.C. Kind of a bold move if you think about it, making a street partisan. Imagine a big city mayor naming a major thoroughfare NRA Avenue or Planned Parenthood Boulevard. Think people would say something about it? It's impressive in a way. But Black Lives Matter wasn't satisfied by it, not even close. The D.C. chapter of the group released a statement attacking Mayor Bowser for not giving them complete control of the city's police department. Quote, "This is to appease white liberals while ignoring our demands. Black Lives Matter means defund the police." Got that? Black Lives Matter means defund the police. Oh, so that's what Black Lives Matter means. No one really explains that. That's their description. And now we know what Intel and Pepsi and Amazon are supporting when they send money. Defunding the police. Suddenly it feels like all the adults have gone to St. Bart's and turned off their cell phones. Who's running this country? Who's in charge? Anyone? Yet amazingly, some Republicans in Washington seem almost giddy as they watch the country go insane. Democrats have gone too far this time, they'll tell you. We're guaranteed to win in November. You've probably gotten texts to that effect recently from friends. It sounds good, but they're wrong. They're totally and completely wrong on many levels. For one thing, if you care about a country, you've got to try, you have an obligation to try your very best to protect and defend it, no matter who is helped in November. That's what patriotism is. It's not about you, it's about America. But leave aside your moral duty. Even as a matter of pure politics, this is a mindless analysis. It's a stupid calculation. Bad ideas are like cancer. When you ignore them, when you pretend they're not there, when you just assume those ride it out, they spread. Most people, as we noted, currently oppose defunding the police. That's where the polls stand right now. But will they feel that way in 3 months? How about in 3 weeks? In an environment like this, you don't know. Things move fast. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell once opposed mocking the American flag, kneeling to attack the country as racist. Now Goodell has announced he's with Black Lives Matter.
We, the National Football League, admit we were wrong for not listening to NFL players earlier and encourage all to speak out and peacefully protest. We, the National Football League, believe Black Lives Matter. I personally protest with you.
So if this is so good for Republicans, explain this. Why does the latest round of national polls indicate that Joe Biden's lead in this race is growing? And that's not a small thing if you plan to live here, if you don't want to live under Attorney General Keith Ellison. So why is it happening? Maybe it's because Republicans in Washington have decided to sit this crisis out. They haven't bothered to explain what's wrong. They haven't bothered to tell us anything about what might be flawed about Black Lives Matter. And they don't plan to, by the way. They're too cynical. They're too fearful. They're going to pretend like it's not happening, repeat platitudes, read bumper stickers on the air, nod solemnly, and do nothing to protect the country. Why would voters reward that? Democrats, by contrast, who are completely wrong, and in fact are leading us down a path that won't end well, are not ashamed in the slightest of what they believe. Day in and day out, they brag about it. Just today, they kneeled in Washington in submission before Black Lives Matter.
We are here to honor George Floyd. For those who wish to, we will now kneel for our moment of silence.
Nancy Pelosi doing something crazy again. Before you comfort yourself with that thought, keep in mind it wasn't just Nancy Pelosi, not by a long shot. Members of the National Guard kneeled too. So did a group of FBI agents. So did the Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, who just the other day was wearing blackface. Now he's with Black Lives Matter. The police chief of Webster, Massachusetts went even further than that. He lay on the ground before them in complete submission. And then things began to spin completely out of control, not just in this country, but throughout the West. As the crowd swelled and the demand for total ideological conformity grew louder, this latest cultural revolution became a parody of itself, as they always do. In London, protesters vandalized a statue of Abraham Lincoln, because what did Abraham Lincoln ever do for black people? In Boston, a mob defaced a monument to the first all-black volunteer regiment in the Civil War, because black people dying to end slavery sounds like white supremacy to us. At around the same time, a law professor from the University of Chicago called for an armed coup to overthrow the president of the United States, but that didn't get a lot of press because it didn't seem particularly newsworthy under the circumstances. It was that kind of weekend. What is going on? What is this about? Even the outlines are blurry at this point, but we know this. No matter what they tell you, it has very little to do with black lives, if only it did. If Democratic leaders cared about saving the lives of black people, and they should, they wouldn't ignore the murder of thousands of young black men in their cities every year. They wouldn't put abortion clinics in black neighborhoods. They would instead do their very best to improve the public schools and to encourage intact families, which we know beyond a shadow of a doubt is central to the life prospects of children. They try to make black neighborhoods as safe as their own neighborhoods. They would close the payday lenders that add so much misery to the lives of poor people of all colors. But they don't even consider doing any of this. They don't even try. Instead, they encourage theft and mayhem as if that will help. It will not help. This may be a lot of things, this moment we're living through, but it is definitely not about black lives. And remember that when they come for you, and at this rate, they will. Anyone who's ever been subjected to the rage of the mob knows the feeling. It's like being swarmed by hornets. You cannot think clearly. And the temptation is to panic. But you can't panic. You've got to keep your head and tell the truth. Tell the truth. If you show weakness of any kind, they will crush you. Ask Drew Brees. By some accounts, poor Drew Brees is on his fourth apology for the crime of defending the American flag. He decided to apologize, and now they're using him as a propaganda organ, hostage tape after hostage tape. At a moment like this, there is no advantage in cowardice, in being Mitt Romney. You think you're saving yourself, you're just empowering the worst people, people who hate you. Before you know it, you're confessing to crimes you didn't commit. Don't start. Tell the truth. And the truth is, this is a good country, better than any other. Of course we are flawed, but we are trying, unlike most places, and we have nothing to be ashamed of, none of us. Immigrants know that best of all. That's why they come here. 1 million new Americans every year. They're not coming because America is a racist country. They're coming because it's not. That's all true. And in our clear moments, we know it's true, even the people claiming it's not. Truth is a defense, no matter what they're telling you at this moment. This moment will pass. Remember that. All moments do. When it does, we will look back at what we just saw in horror and disbelief. But if you're honest now, you will keep your dignity. And ultimately, you will be very glad about that. Life is not worth living without it. Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. We're about to bring you what has become, unfortunately, a nightly update on the descent of our nation into chaos and craziness, a lot of craziness. For more than 2 weeks, this is really all we've covered. There's that much going on right now. We can't cover it all in an hour. Almost all of it, as you know, all the news, is horrifying. Vandals are defacing our country. They're destroying our cities, our institutions, our civil society. They have no right to do any of that. They don't own this country. They did not build it. The rest of us should not allow them to wreck it, but we are allowing them. And it's infuriating to watch. We've definitely been infuriated, genuinely. If you've watched this show, you've probably noticed that. And tonight we want to apologize for that. Here's why. The last thing America needs right now is more anger. Yet another red-faced screamer shouting about this or that. And to the extent that's been us, we're sorry. We genuinely want to help fix this disaster. So adding to the sum total of rage does not help. Going forward, we're going to continue to be as honest as we can. That's our duty. Above all, we try to be honest on this show, sincerely. But we're also going to work to be calm and amused because, honestly, what's the option right now? Keep your sense of humor. That's what they tell you when things get really dark, and it's good advice. Humor brings perspective. All of us could use some perspective right now. So with that in mind, we want to begin tonight with a geography quiz. Here it is. How many countries are there on Earth? Last week, there were a total of 195. But if you guessed that, you're wrong because tonight, there are 196. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the latest addition to the global family of nations, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, formerly known as downtown Seattle.
The point is, in the end, this is our street, it's our station. Whose streets? Our streets! Whose streets? Our streets!
Well, that looks pretty appealing, but before you jump on Expedia to book a trip with the family to the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, now known, by the way, as CHAZ, the country's Tourism and Economic Development Department is calling it that, you should know that there are no beaches in CHAZ. This is a tiny nation. It's smaller than Liechtenstein. The entire country extends only 6 city blocks. It was built on land that was formerly owned in part by the Seattle Police Department, but the founders of CHAZ wanted that land. So they planted a flag and they stole it, just like the conquistadors. The first thing they did after they declared nationhood, and this was a bit of a surprise given that these modern conquistadors claim to be progressive ideologues, but the first thing they did was establish rigid national borders. They built a wall around the place, just like Donald Trump once said he would do. Their wall is made from wooden barricades. A sign at the entrance to the country warns, "You are now leaving the USA." And then there are armed border guards, not technically ICE agents, but close enough, who question everyone seeking entry. Countries have borders, and the founders of CHAZ understood that. They don't want the place flooded with illegals. And by illegals, we mean the citizens of Seattle.
We have been hearing from community members that they have been subjected to barricades set up by the protesters, with some armed individuals running them as checkpoints into the neighborhood.
Well, that's pretty smart. You can't let just anyone into your country. An uncontrolled flood of immigrants would tank the economy, and the people of CHAZ know that. They're not libertarians. They don't work for the Chamber of Commerce. They're not giving you some speech about how immigration makes you richer. They're realists. They want to make this work for the sake of their people. And they don't have much to work with. What exactly is the economy of CHAZ? It's tough. With limited natural resources and a population with virtually no skills of any kind, apart from spray painting the F word on public buildings, they lead the world in that, The people of CHAZ don't have a lot of options for economic development, so they've gone with extortion through violence. Again, just like the conquistadors. It's a time-tested formula, and it's lucrative.
We have heard anecdotally reports of citizens and businesses being asked to pay a fee to operate within this area. This is the crime of extortion.
Well, like the nation it broke from, its mother nation, the United States, the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone is what political philosophers call a proposition nation. It's a country based on an idea rather than particular people. The founding idea in CHAZ, its Magna Carta, its Constitution, its raison d'etre, is that cops are bad, very, very bad. The police are bad and should be abolished. So not surprisingly, CHAZ has banned police from its territory. The surrounding city of Seattle seems okay with that decision. I mean, does the government of Italy dictate local policies within the Vatican City? No, of course not. It's autonomous. Same thing here. What's amazing, though, is that the leaders of CHAZ would like to dictate policies in the city of Seattle. And so they're demanding that Seattle get rid of its police force and close all jails and prisons. At this point, CHAZ has not yet been admitted to the UN. Presumably there's an email headed there now. But as the Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best explained, the country already has recognition from the Seattle city government.
The decision to board up the precinct, our home, the first precinct I worked in, was something I have been holding off. You should know, leaving the precinct was not my decision. You fought for days to protect it. I asked you to stand on that line, day in and day out, to be pelted with projectiles, to be screamed at, threatened, and in some cases hurt. Then to have a change of course nearly 2 weeks in, it seems like an insult to you and our community. Ultimately, the city had other plans for the building and relented to severe public pressure.
Pretty powerful police chief, pretty formidable law enforcement leader. I'm sure the people of Seattle feel well protected. So CHAZ is a nation without leaders. It's a flat system. It's anarchy. How long can that continue? Probably not very long. Anarchy isn't built to last. In the end, the strong always dominate the weak. And in fact, it's already happening. It took barely a day for the nation of CHAZ to get its first warlord. And it was quite a promotion for him. Just a week ago, Raz Simone was an up-and-coming rapper. He was also a superhost for Airbnb. Now, he's a monarch. In videos taken within CHAZ, Simone is seen patrolling the area with his allies. They have guns. They're declaring, "We're the police now." In one clip, the monarch's men assault a citizen of CHAZ for spray painting graffiti inside the zone. Just like the mafia, CHAZ doesn't put up with nonsense like that in their own neighborhood. So that's what's happening in Seattle tonight. Not a big deal. A brand new nation within our own borders. Yes, the last time that happened, it did kick off a civil war that killed hundreds of thousands of Americans and lasted for years. But it's not a huge deal, and that may be why Democrats in Congress seem completely unaware that it's happening. Nancy Pelosi has said nothing about it, neither has Adam Schiff, and you'd think they kind of have their finger on the pulse of the nation. The mayor of Seattle knows about it, obviously. It's happening downtown, but doesn't seem bothered in the slightest. In fact, in the last few days, the mayor of Seattle, Jenny Durkin, has tweeted in honor of a deceased gay icon in the city. She's bragged about building new housing for the homeless. Until tonight, she didn't even acknowledge the existence of CHAZ. Again, a nation built in her downtown. The president noticed, though, last night he tweeted this: "Take back your city now. If you don't do it, I will. This is not a game. These ugly anarchists must be stopped immediately. Move fast." The mayor of Seattle replied this way, simply, "Make us all safe. Go back to your bunker." Ooh, a clever social media wordsmith. There are questions, though, unresolved. For example, what will happen to the American citizens who may have been shopping downtown in Seattle and are now stuck behind the border of CHAZ? Can we repatriate them? Are they now prisoners of war? These are questions of international diplomacy at this stage, but the mayor has not addressed them. She did say tonight that CHAZ is really like a bloc party, and she said she might grant some of their demands. Presumably a bilateral treaty is imminent. We'll be bringing you that news when it happens. The media haven't paid a lot of attention to CHAZ either. They're excited by anything that's new, but not in this new country. It's kind of weird because just a month ago, they were very against demonstrators. The anti-lockdown demonstrators in Michigan, for example, were dangerous zealots.
Really just an ugly, dangerous scene at the state capitol in Michigan.
Black people's right to protest is secondary to white people's right to be an armed protest with long guns.
Bunch of guys camoed up, a bunch of guys with long guns.
These potentially dangerous protests against stay-at-home orders?
Tiny minority with guns marched into the state capitol in Michigan today to lobby in their raucous way.
That when it's white people with guns and they're out and they're angry and their faces with cops.
Didn't see any of that.
Everybody's civil.
These folk ended up in the state capitol, Craig, with automatic weapons, and they were treated with kid gloves.
We said at the top of the show we're going to try to stay amused. Night after night we play those clips, and every night it's just, it makes you red in the face. How can people that stupid have TV shows and that dishonest? But tonight, let's acknowledge it is amusing, because here's the standard. If you protest lockdowns in Michigan with guns, but don't commit any violence at all, it's a threat to the nation. But if you commit beatings and loot and burn down buildings, you are, quote, mostly peaceful. If you create an armed, independent nation in downtown Seattle, it's amazing. Good call. The New York Times is on your side. And in fact, just today, the New York Times published a piece that described the nation of CHAZ as, quote, a homeland for racial justice. So we have homelands now in the middle of our country. The nation of CHAZ is, we're again quoting the New York Times here, quote, an experiment in life without the police, part street festival, part commune. It has free food, and that's what it takes to make everything right. Just get rid of the police. By the way, how many of the people writing this stuff would go spend a week in CHAZ with their families? Or in Chad, for that matter? Zero. But that didn't slow ABC down. It described CHAZ as, quote, festive. Basically like free Tibet, except in this case, the media actually support it because China's on board too. We'd love to explore this question more. The press and the Democratic Party have repeatedly condemned protesters who carry weapons simply to make a point, who have no intention of using them and don't use them. And of course, last winter, we had an entire impeachment charade based on the idea that nobody is above the law.
No one is above the law.
Nobody is above the law.
No one is above the law.
No one is above the law.
No one's above the law.
No one is above the law.
That no person is above the law.
Nobody should be above the law.
Nobody should be above the law.
No one is above the law.
Got that, America? Stop exercising your rights, the ones you thought were the law, and shut up, because no one is above the law, except for Democratic voters, obviously. They're not simply above the law. In fact, they get to make their own laws. In fact, they can make their own countries if they want. It's all totally cool, just as long as they vote in November. Jason Rantz hosts a radio show in Seattle. He ventured into the nation of CHAZ earlier today, and tonight he's reporting from outside the border of CHAZ, the DMZ that separates Seattle from this emerging nation. Jason, thanks so much for coming on. What's it like in CHAZ?
Well, right now, it's too violent for us to go in. It's a little bit too scary for us to go in, because when you go in and you have a different opinion than what they would like to be seen on video, they end up harassing you and they assault you. I had a friend who's a reporter who got assaulted just 2 nights ago. When you go into this area,
I'm sorry. I have to stop you there. I've got to check your privilege for a second. Aren't developing nations always seized by turmoil? Isn't it a little racist to say that CHAZ is violent?
Yes, let me say that they are peacefully challenged right now, and they don't want us to talk about that. In fact, when you hear from Mayor Jenny Durkan, I feel like I've never been more embarrassed for the city before. Mayor Jenny Durkan earlier today essentially said that what we see is happening isn't really happening. That despite the fact that they had to board up all of the windows and the doors to the East Precinct before removing all of their expensive equipment and all of their evidence and everything that they had there, then put a fence around it, they said they weren't actually abandoning the building. Meanwhile, there's not a cop in sight. The cops are told not to come here. And that, of course, is due to the violence that we're told isn't actual violence. It's peaceful protesters. Jenny Durkan goes after President Trump today because he paid attention to this in a tweet last night and earlier today. And now it's officially about Donald Trump lying about domestic terrorists in this crowd. I can tell you, because not only do I live here, but I cover Antifa and I cover anarchists. There is a group in this area in CHAZ that are anarchists, that are Antifa, and there are, in fact, some community organizers who have decided to completely take over. And we have ceded this land to these individuals. And the implications of that cannot be understated. If folks think right now that maybe they live in Los Angeles and New York, oh, it's not going to happen here. Yeah, it's going to happen there. We're allowing it to happen here. We're not getting involved at all. We're pretending it doesn't exist.
I have to ask you, Jason, since you're one of the very few I know who's ventured inside this new nation, is it a tidy, cheerful place? Have they ironed out all the kinks in the sanitation, et cetera? What's it look like?
Well, yeah, so it's not necessarily tidy. However, the city of Seattle has decided to send in crews to do some cleanups and add some toilets for them. So we're actually enabling this kind of behavior.
So they're already getting foreign aid.
Obviously, there is a lot of trash. Of course. I mean, this is a developing nation, so we do need to give some financial aid to the beginning of this. We want to nurture this, right? We want to grow this. And maybe next week, instead of 6 blocks, it'll be 12 blocks. Maybe after that, it can develop into all of Capitol Hill. If we're going to seed this, I mean, let's go all in. Because apparently it's not that big of a deal. Meanwhile, Mayor Jenny Durkan won't come down here, and she certainly won't come down here without armed security and SWAT teams around the block to come in just in case something goes down. Meanwhile, we still have no idea when the East Precinct is actually going to come back, but we can tell you that now when you call 911 for a crisis in progress, it takes 3 times the amount of time it normally would for them to report because they're so undermanned and down a building. It's absolutely disgraceful.
Mayor Jenny Durkan should be forced to live in CHAZ as long as it's there, and I'm serious. She should be. It's her city. Jason Rantz.
No, she keeps her address secret because of threats.
Oh, she does.
Ironic.
But the rest of us get to live with CHAZ. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm starting to figure out how this works. All right, thank you for that update, and I hope you'll join us again as this nation flourishes and grows.
Absolutely.
We're on day 3 of the convention. The question is, how's it going so far? Well, former Democratic candidate Marianne Williamson has been following it closely. She describes the experience as, quote, like binge watching a Marriott commercial. That's about right. Pretty unappetizing. Platitudes heaped upon cliches, smothered in a thick sauce of self-righteousness and stupidity. No normal person could eat what the DNC is serving this week. We tune in because it's our job. So far, the main excitement has been watching just how shamelessly they can lie. The goal appears to be complete reality inversion. Professional rich lady Michelle Obama told America that she was oppressed. The criminally negligent governor of New York bragged about how well he handled the coronavirus. And then Jeffrey Epstein's old pal Bill Clinton showed up to speak as the party's moral voice. There has been a low-grade thrill in watching all of this, we'll admit. At the very least, you've got to tip your hat to their audacity. They don't tell small lies in the Democratic Party. They go all the way. You catch them stealing your wallet, and they arrest you for theft. And then they give you a lecture about how crime doesn't pay. To longtime students of the liberal mind, none of this is new. The left long ago built an entire political party based on the Freudian principle of transference. They displaced their own sins onto you, thereby cleansing their consciences and allowing them to seize the moral high ground. It's a clever trick. But at this point, it's an old trick. We know how it's done. The public certainly seems to have figured it out. Last night, the Democrats' convention lost in the ratings to a variety show called America's Got Talent. A pair of jugglers from the Philippines, brothers wearing glow-in-the-dark headbands, did a yo-yo demonstration on stage. And that outrated Dr. Jill Biden by a lot. We could have told you that was going to happen. Only Nicole Wallace wants to not watch another speech by Dr. Jill Biden. And by the way, what kind of doctor is she? Some of us aren't feeling well. We never learned that answer either. What the Democrats should have done is put the rest of their proceedings on TV. That would get an audience. You might not know this, but most of the actual convention events take place during daytime hours. The networks don't cover them. You have no idea they ever happened. There's a reason for that, obviously. But what a loss for the viewing public. If you saw what they were saying during the day, you would never tune into primetime again. In fact, you might flee the country. For the last 3 days, we have watched all of it. In a moment, we'll show you what we found. We want to begin this evening by bringing you a moment of prayer that broke out at the convention on Monday. A pastor called Frederick Haynes took the microphone. As you listen to this, compare it to what you might hear in your own church.
You had the nerve to build a wall while at the same time you have in the harbor there in New York a Statue of Liberty saying, give me your tired, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. Jesus will say, America, if you don't get your act together, you may well go to hell.
To hell! Vote for Biden, doomed sinners, or you're going to hell. Well, it is a pretty straightforward message. Was Jonathan Edwards ever clearer than that? Was Jerry Falwell? Despite what you may have heard, it is the Democratic Party that is the hotbed of religious extremism these days. Pastor Go to Hell Haynes, for example, is a fan of Minister Louis Farrakhan. These are men of faith, just not your faith. But religion is not the only institution the Democrats are reconfiguring at their convention. The Pledge of Allegiance could use an overhaul, too, they've decided, and they're giving it one. Watch the new version.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and for the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, someday.
Someday. Right. Someday. This could be a good country someday if we're in charge. Otherwise, it's an awful place. Without us at the helm, America is terrible and not worth saving. You've heard this before. Michelle Obama once suggested it. The first time she was proud of her country was when her family got to run it. But that was nuanced by the standards of today. At the Democratic convention this week, a transgender rights activist called Linda LaBeja just came out and said it explicitly.
I've never felt American. I don't know the Pledge of Allegiance. Those are not my systems, the way that is not my president.
Those are not their systems. Donald Trump is not their president, meaning this is not their country as long as they dislike the guy in the White House. So it's all or nothing for them, and right now they're trending toward nothing, which is why they apparently turned over the DNC's stage directions to Colin Kaepernick. Watch.
Many of the videos and pictures you're about to see were recorded before COVID, which is why the kids are not social distancing. However, the audio was recorded over the past month. You may rise or kneel if you are able, per your preference.
You can kneel. So if you watch this stuff for long enough, and we have, it's pretty easy to forget that it's pretty fringy, actually. Look at the polls. Most people don't agree with this. Most Americans like their country. That's why they live here. And a lot of them display that affection by standing for the national anthem. It seems like a small thing, but it means quite a bit to people. Americans have died in battle to protect our national symbols. That is a talking point, yes, but it's not just a talking point. It really happened. But they don't know anything about that at the Democratic National Convention, and they don't think that your kids ought to know about it either. And that's why they've endorsed erasing American history.
May this moment in history manifest more monuments like these to replace the old ones that no one really cares to see anymore. May their emergence and long overdue establishment and existence remind everyone of our terrible, ugly, and hurtful Black world history.
So there are parts of history that no one cares to see anymore, so we're getting rid of it. You keeping track at home? If not, we're at Erase American History, Rewrite the Pledge of Allegiance, Mock and Degrade the National Anthem, Turn Christianity into a Political Weapon. They have been busy over there at the DNC. But there's more, because now it's time for some granular policy discussions, the details of how to run the country. Now, we've showed you in previous nights this week some of the DNC's platform. They want to get rid of a lot of the country's prisons, for example. They'd like to do away with bail for accused criminals. But that's just a start, just a little taste, a little appetizer before the main course. So for more, we're going to go to someone now called Jay Mai. You should know that Jay Mai's preferred pronouns are they, them. According to their biography at Wake Forest University, Jay Mai is, quote, a Black Vietnamese transgender, non-binary, gender-transcendent mermaid queen king currently living out their ever-evolving truths in Winston-Salem, end quote. Got it? Okay, now listen to Jay Mai.
Why can't folks imagine a world without the cops? Why can't folks imagine a world without prisons? Why can't people expand their imaginations to include community care, to include an abolitionist future? And I'm talking about like for real abolition, not just watered down DNC version of abolition. We're talking about abolishing the police. We're talking about abolishing ICE. We're talking about abolishing prisons.
Yeah, we're talking about abolishing the police, abolishing ICE, abolishing all prisons. We're imagining a world like that. We're bringing it to you. You're starting to get some sense why they're not putting this stuff on TV. Democrats and their faithful lackeys, the media, have been telling you for weeks that none of this is real. You're imagining it. Democrats don't really want to take the cops away and leave you defenseless. Yes, they are voting to take billions from police departments across the country. But that's not really defunding. It's redistributing. Not a big deal. Calm down. But now, Mai shows up and lets an entire animal shelter of cats out of the DNC's bag and lets you know that, yes, all your fears are true. We're doing exactly what you think we're doing. The gender-transcendent mermaid queen kings are here, and it's a whole new deal now. Get psyched. And be sure to warn your daughters. No more field hockey scholarships to Bowdoin for them. No, they're boys on the field. Democrats want biological men to compete with girls in sports. Most parents of girls think that's nuts because it is, and terrible for girls because, obviously. But at the Democratic National Convention, it's not even questioned. It's just business as usual. Watch transgender person Marissa Richmond explain.
We're going to have a panel looking at trans youth issues. We've been watching state legislatures, especially here in the South, targeting trans youth for trying to deny them access to health care, education, and even access to the right to play sports, although needless to say, the mishandling of the coronavirus by the current administration is affecting a lot of people's ability to play sports, but they've been particularly transphobic in schools.
Okay, so no more field hockey scholarships, and I'm sorry, your daughters are not going to make the soccer team. That's bad news. Most people could live with it if they had to. But once again, it's just the beginning. What if they abolished capitalism, too? Would you like some bread lines to go with that? How about some humiliation on the side? It's all on the menu. Listen to aspiring economist Ashley Nicole McCrae.
This future that we all want, that we're all trying to build, really is about the destruction of colonization, white supremacy, and capitalism.
The destruction of colonization, white supremacy, and capitalism. What does that mean exactly? We're not sure. We're not delegates to the DNC. But we're pretty certain it's going to be bad news for you. But not the end of the bad news. No, there's more. Elizabeth Warren showed up to speak at the Native American caucus on Tuesday. Seems pretty likely she's come to steal your horses.
Join us in fighting for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and in supporting the Democrats so that we can all continue our work for Indian country.
It's just too great. Our work for Indian country. We kept waiting for Ralph Northam to show up at the DNC's African American panel wearing a hood. Maybe that's tomorrow. People online did love the Warren panel, by the way. Loved it. In fact, it probably would have outrated the Yo-Yo Brothers from the Philippines if they'd aired it at night. People at home flooded the DNC with suggestions for Chief Warren. Here's one. If Elizabeth Warren can speak at a Native American event, maybe Milli Vanilli can host the Grammy Awards. That's not a bad idea, actually. But it hurt Elizabeth Warren's feelings, so the DNC shut down the chat room. What a shame. It bears repeating, by the way, that not all of this insanity was confined just to the daytime. Some of it bled into primetime as well. Sandy Cortez showed up to promise health care, college education, higher wages to illegal aliens. She did all of that in a 90-second speech. Pretty impressive. It was like a socialist Mad Libs competition. Here's part of it.
Thank you to everyone here today endeavoring towards a better, more just future for our country and our world. In fidelity and gratitude to a mass people's movement working to establish 21st century social, economic, and human rights, including guaranteed health care, higher education, living wages, and labor rights for all people in the United States. I hereby second the nomination of Senator Bernard Sanders of Vermont for President of the United States of America.
Let's put her in charge. Ooh, that's a good idea. Whoa. We should note that crazy as all of this was, and it was, none of it was too crazy for Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. Sandy Cortez called for giving government health insurance to foreign nationals, tens of millions of them. Mai imagined a world without cops or prisons. Some lunatic in a clerical collar showed up and said Republicans are going to hell. Harris and Biden nodded along. It all seemed normal to them, because it is.